So in the two previous videos, we saw the two basic ways to store information in JavaScript using variables and arrays. In the next few videos, we're going to see how we can use JavaScript to affect the logic of the application, i.e. what it does. The code that we've written so far is going to do the same thing every time. But what if we want our code to do different things depending on different situations? Well, for that, we'd use an if statement. So let's get rid of the code we've got so far. And can you set up a variable for me called x with a value of 1? Go for it. Hope you managed that. Var to create a variable, x to name the variable, and then equals 1 to give it that value. So what we're going to do with this is create an if statement which depends on the value of x. And this looks like this. So we start with if, and then in parentheses, we put our condition that we want to be true. And I'm going to test for whether or not x is equal to 1. That might seem a bit crazy when I know that x is equal to 1, but just stay with me for the moment. Now we test whether x is equal to 1 using x and then double equals 1. Now that can be quite confusing for new programmers, but it actually makes a lot of sense. When you see a single equals in a program, it means that you're setting the value of something to something else. When you see a double equals, it means we're testing whether or not those two things are the same. So it's a logical difference, and therefore there's a different symbol. So it's two equal signs. But it is a very common beginner mistake to just put one equal sign there, and then what you'll find is this will set x is equal to 1 and say that the statement is true, which is very rarely what you want to happen. So always put two equal signs in an if statement. And then, just like with functions that we saw a few videos ago, we have curly brackets to contain whatever code we want to happen if x is 1. So we might, for example, just alert x is 1. Hurrah! So let's just check. See what happens. X is indeed 1. What would happen then in this program if I changed x to be 2? What would happen when I run it? I hope you got the answer, which is absolutely nothing, because x is not 1 anymore, so it's not going to alert that. We can actually have an else statement at the end of our if statement, which will do something if this is not true. So if x is 1, then we're going to alert that. If it's not, we'll alert x is not 1. Simple as that. So now when we run it, we get x is not 1. And of course, if we change it back to 1, we'll get x is equal to 1. So this is obviously a very simplistic example and may seem a little bit inane. So let's try and link it with something that we might have in a real web page. So something that almost every web app needs to do at some point is to log you in. And obviously if statements are absolutely crucial to that. So you're going to expect the user to enter username and password, and then you're going to use an if statement to see if the username is correct and the password is correct, then log the user in. If not, give them some sort of error message. So we're going to create a very minimal login system, and I'm actually going to set you this as a challenge. So rather than have a username and a password, we're going to have a magic word. Now you can set that magic word to be whatever you like, but what I want is for our page to say what is the magic word, and then have a text input for the user to enter it, and a button when they're done, and then an alert to tell them whether or not they've got it right. Simple as that. Go for it. All right, hope you managed it. So let's have a paragraph tag saying what is the magic word. And then on the next line, we'll have an input with a type of text and an ID of magic word. And then on the final line, we'll have our button with an ID of check magic word, because that's what we're going to do when the button is pressed. And we'll have enter on our button. There we go. Oh yeah, and we've still got our code running, so X is still 1. Excellent. That looks good. So now we've written the content of our page. Let's write the logic. So we only want our logic to happen when the button is pressed. So we know how to do that now, hopefully. Document.getElementById. The ID of the button is check magic word. And we want to set onClick to be equal to a function that we're going to make. And then we put that function in curly brackets. So first off, as always, I'm just going to alert something just to make sure that everything's connected up right. There we go. So definitely recommend always writing your JavaScript step by step like this, not doing it all in one go. So now what we're going to need to do is get the value of whatever the user has typed so we can check it against our magic word. So let's create a variable for that. And I'm going to call it magic word entered. And I'm going to set that equal to the value of this text input. So remember, the text input has an ID of magic word. So we'll use document.getElementById magic word, and we want to get the value of that. So as we did in the previous video, dot value to get the value of that. And once again, because I like things happening really step by step, I'm just going to alert the value of that to make sure that everything once again is wired up correctly. So let's just put in ASDF, ASDF. Brilliant. Step by step, you're much less likely to go wrong, much easier to fix it if you do go wrong. All right, the second variable I'm going to create is the actual magic word, because I want to keep this not kind of embedded deeply in my code. I might want to change it at some point. So I'm going to have abracadabra as my magic word for obvious reasons. And now what we want to do is set up our if statement. And it's pretty straightforward, hopefully. So if, and then parentheses, so if magic word entered is equal to, and remember we need the double equals because we're checking whether or not it's equal to rather than setting it equal to. So if that's equal to magic word, we'll just alert something like, you got it. And then obviously, if this was a real kind of web page, we'd add some logic for either logging the user in or doing whatever it is that this page is supposed to do when the user gets the magic word correct. And if it's not, we'll alert, nope, try again. There we go. So that should do it. Let's find out. So let's get it right first off. Abracadabra. Enter, you got it. Fantastic. And then if we enter anything else, nope, try again. Brilliant. So I hope you managed to do that more or less by yourself. Hopefully this gives you a clear idea of why if statements are so important. Essentially, they allow us to do something on a certain condition happening. And that's absolutely central to the idea of programming. And in fact, now that we know about if statements, we're capable of building some basic JavaScript games. And we're going to do that in the next video, where we'll make a simple game called How Many Fingers?